You may have heard people saying, stop caring what others think of you. Well, that's an absolutely horrible piece of advice, and you should only follow it if you want to get nowhere in this life. Some of you might have heard of the lab coat experiment. This was an experiment done at a very prestigious university in America, in which two different groups of people were given the same white lab coat. Half of them were told that it's a doctor's lab coat, whereas the other half were told that it's a painter's coat. What the studies have shown is that the people who thought they were wearing doctor's clothes outperformed the other group significantly. And what does this tell us? It basically tells us that it's all about psychology. The clothes you wear are all about the perception that you have about yourself and the perceptions that others have about you. And why is that? It's because clothes are like a uniform. Cooks have a uniform, policemen have a uniform, army men have a uniform, successful men have a uniform. And the uniform of the successful man is the suit. Now, you might be thinking, nowadays not many people wear suits anymore, so why should you still wear a suit? Well, that's because for the past 150 years, or even more, a suit was correlated with a successful man. And that's imprinted in our minds now. It's not something that we can change, and that's why when we see a guy walking down in a well-tailored suit, we will automatically think that he's more successful than everyone else. So let's break this psychological aspect into two different parts. First of all, let's think about how others perceive you. Now, when you're walking down the street, the others around you will perceive you as a more successful man, a more attractive man, a more confident man. And confident, what do I mean by confident? How can others perceive you as more confident by simply wearing a suit? Well, that's because of aspect number 2, which is your own psychology. You see, when you're wearing certain clothes, you will think differently about yourself. Let's take an extreme example. Say you're going on a date with a girl you found either in a bookstore, in a cafe shop, or maybe even on Tinder. It doesn't matter. Now, let's take two extreme examples. In the first one, you're showing up in a tank top, in shorts, you have unkempt hair, unbrushed teeth. In the second example, you're wearing a tuxedo. Now, I'm not saying that you should be wearing a tuxedo on a first date. Actually, maybe it's even better to wear the tank top, who knows? Depends entirely on the date itself. But what I am saying is that those two different clothes are gonna vastly change the way you see yourself. Because in that first example, you might think about yourself that you're not that special. Maybe you think that you're just an average person. Your self-esteem is not that high. But if you are wearing the tuxedo, you will feel like James Bond. You will think you are James Bond. And the way you think about yourself influences the actions and the way that you speak. And yes, it might even be better to be a little bit delusional about this. After all, with confidence, it's fake it until you make it. So what does this all have to do with caring what others think about you? Why should you care about what others think of you? Well, this all comes down to prehistoric times, when men used to live in caves. Back then, everyone was part of a group. They were part of a tribe. And if the people in your tribe were not accepting of you, if they thought lower of you, if they thought less of you, then you would be cast out. You would die alone. That's why we as humans have evolved to care what those around us think of us. And this has not changed today. If you are an outcast, if you don't know how to behave in society, if you don't know how to look in a society, you will be an outcast. You will be socially inept, and you will not be able to make acquaintances and connections that easily. And for those of you saying that caring what others think makes you anxious, that's because you're caring about the totally wrong things. Let me present to you Stoicism. What Stoicism teaches us is that there's two types of thought that we could have. There's those things that we can influence and those that we can't. You should never concern yourself with how others think of you based on stuff you cannot influence. For example, if you're talking and you're saying something that might offend them, well, if you took all precaution to be polite, to be courteous, to be a gentleman, then the fact that they are offended is entirely their fault and you should not be concerned about it. You should only be concerned about your actions, not how those around you respond. If I wear a suit outside, I know that some might react negatively. I receive negative comments all the time, I'm used to it. But I know that I'm doing my best to look like a gentleman, and that's all that matters. So now that you know that caring what others think is not necessarily bad, depending on how you look at it, you should also realize that you need to improve yourself. But that's the good part, because glowing up is easy actually. Now, the modern gentleman is both emotionally stable as well as masculine. Those are two things you must master. So how do you do that? Well, you do that with the 4 pillars of self-improvement. This is something I came up with, and if it already exists, please be aware that I arrived at the idea independently.
Direct marketing. I thought of that. Turned out it already existed, but I arrived at it independently.
First, we have the inner mind, and we develop that through meditation, through gratitude, through Stoicism. This is how we think about things, and is the first thing you should start improving. Then we have the outer mind, which comprises of skills, social skills, knowledge, fine taste, everything that can be cultivated. So, you do this by reading self-improvement books. You do this by reading fiction books, classic literature, watching old movies, listening to more elevated music. This is how you improve your outer mind. Then we have our inner body. And this is what most people on self-improvement improve. This is your working out, your diet. This is becoming physically attractive. But then we also have the outer body. And you do that through grooming, you do that through body language and through your style. And working on your outer body is not actually that difficult. Let me break it down. First of all, you have grooming. And this is extremely simple. All you have to do is brush your teeth twice a day. Use a deodorant stick. And yes, I mean stick, not spray. Do not use a deodorant spray. Those things are toxic. Trim your beard or shave it off completely if you don't want to have a beard or stubble. Comb your hair every single day and shower every single day. This is the bare minimum that every man should do. The next step up would be stuff like taking care of your skin, using SPF every single day. This is the next step, but the least you should do is the bare minimum. Next, we have body language. And scientists have actually proven that most communication happens non-verbally. So, the way that you speak rather than your words, and the way that your body moves, is more important than the words you actually use. When it comes to body language, you should always have a dominant body language. And you do that by taking up space in a room. And this does not mean that if you're on a bus, you should just lay over 3 different seats. No. Be respectful, but if you're sitting down in a chair, for example, at a restaurant, you can drape over that chair. You see it all the time in Mad Men. That is what I mean. Also, do not fidget. A lot of men, especially when they're nervous, have the tendency to fidget with their nails, or with their fingers, or with their hands, with their feet. You see this all the time. This is a sign of nervousness. And if you want to appear more confident, if you want to appear like a Thomas Shelby or a Don Draper, needs to be unreactive. You need to be still. When it comes to style, this can be broken down into 3 different categories. The first is style education. You need to know what mistakes to avoid and what style rules to pay attention to. Next up, you have finding your style. There's so many different styles out there that you can choose from. Stuff like preppy, stuff like business casual, smart casual, business, cowboy look if that's your thing.
You think on that, boy.
But you need to find your own particular style. And the next and last category is improving your style. Hey you! The video you have just watched is part of this week's podcast episode, in which we discuss why you should care what others think of you and how to improve yourself. The styles you should choose if you want to look attractive and masculine, and the definitive guide to improving your style, step by step. Check it out right here.